He was the first great American novelist. His novels are regularly required reading in high school, although the sparks and Cliff's notes on those works may be even more read. And he was born on July 4th, which is why I am doing him today. His name was Nathaniel Hawthorne. I'm Stephen Yoder, and this is Abbreviated Bios. Nathaniel Hawthorne was born on July 4th, 1804 in Salem, Massachusetts, to Nathaniel Hawthorne and Elizabeth Clark Manning. You may wonder, why doesn't his father have a W in his name? Well, there's a good reason for that. Well, Nathaniel's triple great-grandfather, William, was a major persecutor of Quakers and famously had a Quaker woman whipped. Nathaniel's great-great-grandfather, John, was one of the judges at the Salem witch trials. As an adult, Nathaniel added a W to his last name, some say to distance himself from those relatives. Nathaniel's father was a sea captain who died of yellow fever in Suriname in 1808 when his son was only 4 years old. The family lived for a time with his maternal uncle. Nathaniel did not have a close relationship with his mother. He wrote when she was on her deathbed, "I love my mother, but there has been, ever since my boyhood, a sort of coldness of intercourse between us, such as is apt to come between persons of strong feelings if they are not managed rightly." Nathaniel, for the most part, lived a fairly solitary life until about the age of 33. He did attend Bowdoin College from 1821 to 1825, where he befriended men such as future Congressman Jonathan Silly and future President Franklin Pierce. He wrote his first book, Fanshawe, about his experiences at Bowdoin in 1828. He paid to publish it himself. Later, he tried to have all copies destroyed, but a few have survived. In the 1830s, Nathaniel became involved with a manipulative woman, Mary Silsby. She pushed him with a fake sob story into challenging John Lewis O'Sullivan to a duel. Sullivan refused the challenge after discussing it with Jonathan Silly. Silly died a few months later in a duel of his own. Hawthorne wrote a memorial about him in 1838. In the mid-1830s, Hawthorne was matched up with Elizabeth Peabody in a courtship, but over time, it became apparent that Nathaniel was much more interested in her younger sister, Sophia. Sophia had been considered an invalid who suffered from debilitating headaches. When she was with Nathaniel, however, her headaches were much less painful. The two had a long courtship as Nathaniel did not want to marry her until he had a steady source of income. In January of 1839, Hawthorne was appointed as a weigher and gauger for the Boston Custom House by George Bancroft. He kept that job until 1841 when he became one of the founding members of the utopian community called Brook Farm. Hawthorne thought he would have more time to write, but he found himself cutting hay, milking cows, and shoveling manure. His blistered hands made it tough to write. He wondered how anyone could, I quote, expect pretty stories from a man who fed pigs. Hawthorne left Brook Farm after 6 months of that hard labor. He decided he couldn't wait forever to marry Sophia. They were married on July 9, 1842, and had a very happy marriage. They would have 3 children together, Una, Julian, and Rose. Hawthorne was appointed surveyor of the District of Salem as a spoils system appointment in 1846, but he lost it when Zachary Taylor, a Whig, became president in 1849. Hawthorne had not always been productive in his writing during the 1830s and 1840s, but he did publish the Twice Told Tales in 1837 and quite a few more short stories in the 1840s, such as Young Goodman Brown, The Minister's Black Veil, The Birthmark, and Rappaccino's Daughter. His most productive period came after he left government service. The Hawthorne family moved to Lenox, Massachusetts in the Berkshires in 1850. Over the next few years, Hawthorne published his 3 most famous novels, The Scarlet Letter, The House of the Seven Gables, and The Blithedale Romance. The Scarlet Letter is Hawthorne's most famous work. Hester Prynne had a daughter out of wedlock and because of her adultery was forced to wear a scarlet A on her dress from then on. She was an outcast. Hester, however, made the A into a beautiful object on her. She lives a humble life. Her sin was plain to see, but her unnamed lover lived a life of guilt that is not revealed until near the end of the book. That reveal is a very vivid scene. Hawthorne called this book positively a hell-fired story into which I found it impossible to throw any cheering light. The House of the Seven Gables is a Gothic story about a seemingly cursed house. The book influenced horror writer H.P. Lovecraft. The Blithedale Romance was a book incorporating some of Hawthorne's experiences at Brook Farm, the utopian community. During this time at the Berkshires, he met and befriended Herman Melville, who was struggling with writing what would be his masterpiece, Moby Dick. Hawthorne became such an encouragement to him that Melville dedicated the book to Hawthorne. In 1852, Hawthorne's good friend Franklin Pierce ran for president. Hawthorne wrote a campaign biography which helped him get elected. Pierce then appointed Hawthorne to be the U.S. consul at Liverpool, England. He remained outside the U.S. for the next 7 years. His post ended in 1857, after which he lived in and toured Italy in 1858 and part of 1859. The Hawthornes returned home to Concord in 1860. He published The Marble Faun in 1860 and Our Old Home in 1863, both of which had European settings. Nathaniel Hawthorne's health began failing in the 1860s. While on a trip to the White Mountains with his friend Franklin Pierce, Hawthorne died in his sleep at Plymouth, New Hampshire on May 18, 1864. He probably died of gastrointestinal cancer. He was buried in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in Concord, Massachusetts. Nathaniel Hawthorne was the first great American novelist. He pioneered Gothic Romanticism. He influenced other authors such as Herman Melville and H.P. Lovecraft. Reading The Scarlet Letter is usually a high schooler's first introduction to literary analysis. Thank you for listening to Abbreviated Bios. If you like these stories, please subscribe to this podcast.